Hello, my name is Sandy Goldie, and I supervise student teachers at the University of Florida, and I have with me one of our exemplary cooperating teachers, and I'll let her introduce herself and tell you a little bit about what she does here.
Hi, I'm Amy Beres. I'm the band director at Howard Bishop Middle School in Gainesville. Our band program has a little over 200 students in it, and our schedule is comprised of 3 beginning band classes, a concert band, and what we call our Symphonic Winds, which is our top performing ensemble. This is the only fine arts offering at our school as an elective, and we have students from all over our county because of a magnet program that we have here, and all different types of learners, for all different types of socioeconomic statuses, so it's pretty much a big mix of everything.
Okay.
So that's it.
Well, Amy is one of our really exemplary cooperating teachers, so we've asked her to share a few things about what she thinks about student teaching and having student teachers. So first of all, would you just share with us a little bit about your general approach to mentoring student teachers?
Sure. One of the first things that I tell student teachers when they come in to work with my program is that I don't view them as a student. I view them as a colleague. And that's the way that I'm going to treat them, and that's the way I'm going to expect of them. Because, you know, in reality, when they're doing their internship, they're doing it so that they can see what it's like to actually be, you know, the teacher in charge of a program. So whatever it is, how I expect to be treated is how they're treated, and you know, from day one. So I think was the first thing I used to say is, I expect you to take initiative. Don't sit there and stare at me and wait for me to tell you what to do. If you see something that needs to be done, do it. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And you know, I'm going to treat you like my colleague, not as another student, because I already have 200 and some of them to keep up with. So.
Well, that's excellent. When you first get the student teachers and they come in, how do you go about introducing them to the band and establishing sort of with them what your expectations might be?
Well, I talk to my students a little bit, not too much, but a little bit ahead of time in the fall before we get our first placement, and I explain to them, and I have them view it as a big honor that the university is entrusting our band program with helping to train future music educators, and that we need to take that very seriously. I let the kids know ahead of time that they're going to have other people on the podium, and how that's a very good thing, because it helps us to get another viewpoint on things. And you know, that they, whatever that student teacher asks them to do, they need to respond to that person the same exact way they know I expect to be responded to, that they're an extension of me to some extent. So I kind of give them a little bit of a heads up. You know, as silly as it may seem, I make a banner to put in the front of the classroom, you know, welcome Miss So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, and we try to draw a picture of what instrument they play on it. If for anything else, you know, to make the student teacher feel welcome, but it also helps the kids to remember their name, so that, you know, it's easier for them to form a bond with them. So that's kind of the stuff we do in advance. Mm-hmm. But other than that, when they come, the first day they show up, each class, we take a few minutes at the beginning of class where they introduce themselves, what instrument they play, and then they have to think of the most interesting fact about themselves to share with the intern, hoping that it's something unique that will help them to associate that face with that name, with that fact. You know, so they're you know, we get everything from, well, the most interesting thing about me is that I don't have anything interesting, which is, you know, typical middle school response, to, you know, my name is Susie and I play the flute and I've traveled to every continent on the planet, you know, before I've turned 12, or, you know, something. So things like that to help them, hopefully to help them start associating faces and names, because feedback that I've gotten from students throughout the years, one of the biggest things that they pick up on is that person didn't care enough about me to learn my name. It was always, hey you, or clarinet girl or something like that, and they find that very offensive, and I would agree with them. So learning names is a real big thing for them at first. I have them. We haven't actually done it with my current intern now yet. But I have them pretty early on have the intern demonstrate something on their instrument. Whether it be a fun tune that they did in marching band or something that they did at, a senior recital that was flashy and exciting. Number one, it's a great opportunity for my kids to have a good model of tone quality for that particular instrument, and it also kind of gives the kids a hey, this person knows what they're talking about, so I need to listen when they ask me to do something.
And as they first get here, how much do you allow them to teach, or do you just have them go ahead and take over everything, or do you do some kind of transition?
What I do, they observe for the first few days, and depending upon the questions they ask, depending upon their punctuality and things like that, will determine how quickly I put them in front of a group. But it's usually fairly quick, because I think they usually start when they come from the University of Florida. They usually wind up starting on a Thursday. So they observe Thursday and Friday, and then most of the time Monday morning, first period, they're on the podium. And I kind of have a method to what classes I release to student teachers. I give them first period for the simple fact of they need to have experience with dealing with a kid first thing in the morning when they're still half asleep, or they maybe didn't eat breakfast, or whatever the case may be, to know how to get them engaged and motivated. The next class that gets released to them is sixth period, because they need to know the opposite end of that spectrum, and how they are at the end of the day when their brain is already out the door, figuring out what snack they're going to eat when they get home, or for baseball practice or whatever. So that way, they've at least got some experience with dealing with kids, especially at the middle school age. And then they get fifth period, which in most cases, depending on what grade level they're in, is after lunch. So that's another one of those key times during the day when behaviors start to change and the level of effort is not always the same. Their bellies are full, sometimes they're ready for a nap. So it's kind of a combination between how they act in the morning versus how they act in the afternoon.
And in those middle classes, while they're still in that transition period where maybe they're watching you teach, do you have any established guidelines for them about the things they're supposed to be doing? Are they watching? Are they playing along? Are they walking around and
it's a little bit of everything. Depending on the situation, I may, ask, can you, hover around the trumpet section because they're really having trouble with such and such, or it might be, I really haven't had the chance to pay a lot of attention to the percussion in the last, week or so. Could you hang out back there with them and kind of assess what's going on, and if, there's any glaring problems? When I first came to the school, we had 2 band directors, and obviously now it's just me. But in those first few years when there were 2 of us, we were very good at team teaching, where if someone was on the podium, it didn't bother me that there was someone else walking around whispering something, leaning over to a kid. So I'm accustomed to that. So I tell them, I don't have a problem with, if you hear something, don't just let it go by. If that trumpet player's not, putting their third valve slide out, then, lean over to them, third valve slide, and while we're teaching that, I don't have a problem with that. So sometimes they're doing that. Sometimes I ask them, especially if it's the section that's on their primary instrument, clarinets are having a really hard time with those 16th note runs. Can you sit in and play with them so that they can hear what it's supposed to sound like? And sometimes, not necessarily very often, but sometimes I'll throw them up on the podium so that I can get off of the podium and have the opportunity to hear the ensemble from that vantage point, because we don't always have that luxury. So.
And another question I had is, once they're on the podium and they've sort of taken over that class, how do you go about the idea of interjecting, or do you just turn it over to them? What is that balance like for you as far as interjecting things when you maybe see that things are needed?
There are a few different things that I do. For the first, I'd say, a week or so, and again, depending upon how successful they are, I will definitely sit out in the back of the room and kind of take notes and well, you did this really well, or it took you 25 minutes out of the 50-minute class period before the kids played their first note, kind of a thing. But after a while, I try to take a step back and not to just kind of leave them hanging, but because I feel like I need to remove myself from the situation so that the kids get used to having to go to them instead of, running to me. Ms. Beres, can I go to the bathroom? Well, I don't know. You have to ask your teacher. Ms. Beres, can I go to the clinic? Well, I don't know. You need to ask your teacher. So there are times where I will, come, either in this, we have a back room over here, those people watching the video can't see, or I'll sit back there, or I'll sit in my office with all the doors open where I can still see and hear things to be able to monitor what they're doing, but so that it removes me enough from the situation so that the kids have no choice but to go to them, so that they have to deal with drink of water, bathroom, clinic, my reed is broken, I forgot my music, all those other umpteen different things. So some in the classroom, some where I remove myself, but I also explain to the interns that, I have to clean up whatever mess you perhaps leave, so I'm not going to let you, mess my kids up or the progress that they've made. So if you're doing something wrong, I'm going to let you know. And the way I try to do it is, if it's not something, horrifyingly wrong, I'll wait until after the class, and during that class change, I'll say, hey, you need to don't explain staccato means such and such. We don't use the term short, or things like that. So I will quickly explain, and they're usually really good about implementing what I've asked them to fix in the very next class. If it's something that is majorly wrong, I'm sitting in the room, or I'm sitting, observing from afar, and I see that there are classroom management issues perhaps. What I tend to do is I'll jot down on a piece of paper, you're losing them because they want to play, you're talking too much, so on and so forth. I'll jot it down on a slip of paper, and I'll just kind of casually walk up to the podium and slip it on there and bring it to their attention and not say anything, and then walk away. And reason being is because I don't want them to feel embarrassed that that they're being corrected in front of a group of kids. And I also feel that if I do too much of the correcting verbally, the kids are going to view the student teacher as not being as competent, and therefore not kind of respecting them the way we want them to be respected.
Now, can I ask you one other thing?
Sure.
In closing, let's say there were a new cooperating teacher that's just getting student teachers for the first time. Do you have any big picture word of advice kinds of things that you would impart to someone who's new to this, or that you think are really important?
Yeah. I would definitely say share as much information as you possibly can. The best thing we can do, I think, to further the profession is to not keep our bag of tricks to ourselves. When I have a student teacher that walks in, they get a binder that has a hard copy of pretty much of every document that I've ever produced. And I try to give them as much information and as much resources as I possibly can, because I know that once they walk out that door and they're on their own, they may not have access to those resources or be courageous enough, so to speak, to ask for access to those resources. So I feel that in good conscience, giving them as much information as I can right off the bat will help them have a better chance of being successful when they have a program of their own.
All right. Well, we also have a database of just documents that people are sharing that they give to their student teachers. So if you want to include any of those, we'll try to get those up
Sure.
as well.
Sure.
Well,
definitely.
wonderful. Thank you so much
Oh,
for
you're
sharing.
welcome. Anytime. My pleasure.
Thank you.